Good morning. You're watching Business World Live. I'm Danny Laurel. It's the start of a new trading day. Let's kick off with our banner story. Just a few days after being delivered, Moderna vaccines are ready to be rolled out by the private sector. But ICTSI, which is leading the program, says there are bottlenecks that the government still needs to clear. Regina Lay has the story.
Businesses are calling on the government to speed up the vaccination program nationwide. At a recent virtual forum hosted by think tank Strat-based ADR Institute, executives discussed ways for the private sector to fill the gaps in the race to herd immunity. ICTSI, which bought the Moderna vaccines on behalf of the private sector, says there are bottlenecks on the ground that slow down the whole process.
At the vaccination center, there's two bottlenecks, right? One is determining whether the person has an appointment or not. The validating is easy, right? Scan a QR code. But you don't want 4 or 5 people in a household having to do appointments 4 or 5 different ways. One is doing appointments with this company. Another one is doing it with the LGU. Another one is doing it in the province that they're from. The second bottleneck is the health screening. You shouldn't have to turn up to a vaccine center and sit down with a doctor for 15 minutes to fill up a health screening form, right? You can do it in advance.
ICTSI will begin rolling out over the next few days the first batch of Moderna vaccines, which it procured last year but was delayed a couple of times. This first shipment of 249,600 doses were split up. 150,000 doses went to the government, while the rest were distributed to various companies. This makes Moderna the 5th brand to be used in the country. But despite the growing supply, only a little over 2% of the population have been fully vaccinated or have gotten both doses. And with the emergence of the Delta variant, businesses are wary about another lockdown.
We haven't been very good in testing, contact tracing, testing, and the use of data. And that kind of massive effort is really something that we need from the government. South Korea never locked down widespread strictly because they did this very well. If you're testing, you're tracing, your data analytics are very good, then you don't need to resort to widespread lockdowns. So that's one thing we need from the government.
ICTSI's Christian Gonzalez agrees. Gonzalez is also involved in the company's build-out of various vaccine hubs, including the one in Nayong Filipino. He says based on their experience, vaccination sites can ramp up to jabbing as many as 700 people an hour.
But a lot of people have parking garages. A lot of people have ballrooms. A lot of people have things like this. And if you very quickly get everybody using the same very efficient setup, I'm telling you, in each site, you can do 500, 600, 700, maybe even an hour. And we won't have to, the government can then focus on what the government should be focusing on, alleviating poverty and things like that, not having to worry about how we're going to go from 2% to 3% because we get very quickly to 60%. But that's not going to happen without the private sector.
Regina Lay, One News.
And this just in, unemployment dropped to 7.7% in the month of May. That's from 8.7% in April. Now, this translates to 3.73 million Filipinos still without jobs as of May, amid the worst health and economic crisis that hit the country in recent history. This is from about 4.14 million jobless Filipinos in April. Meanwhile, 44.7 million Filipinos were employed as of May 2021. That represents an employment rate of 92.3% for the month. This is higher than the 91.3% employment rate, which was recorded in the month of April. Now, still on the labor force, government agencies and business groups have signed an agreement to create 1 million jobs this year to aid in economic recovery. Now, under the Reform, Rebound, Recover 1 million jobs for 2021 project, businesses would be responsible for identifying job vacancies from member countries and will be working with the government's nurse task force. The task force, on the other hand, would coordinate with the IATF to vaccinate qualified workers. The Philippine Star reports that the project aims to tap Filipino talents in specific sectors, including construction, manufacturing, tourism, and hospitality and export industries. Trade Secretary and Nurse Task Force Chairman Mon Lopez said the partnership would boost government efforts to reinvigorate the labor market, while ECOP Chairman Edgardo Lacson expects the tie-up to bring down the 8.7% unemployment rate in April to pre-pandemic levels. We've got more economic data to be breaking this morning and for markets to be digesting. Let's kick off with my terminal. Here you can see there the IHS market Philippines June manufacturing PMI at 50.8. That is versus 49.9 in May. Now recall that anything above 50 signals an expansion here, and anything below that is a contraction. So again, we are back to expansionary mode, and this is also good news, and you can see that on my terminal above that red line, which is 50. This is also the highest reading we've seen since March 2021, and compared to 1 year ago, the same month we were at 49.7, which is a contraction. Nevertheless, output was 48.8 in the month of May. That's still contracting. It's a third consecutive month of contraction, but what buoyed that was the new orders rising. That was the highest since March this year. Now, another thing to be watching out for is the bank lending. Now, that bank lending fell for a sixth straight month in the month of May. However, you can in the month of May, but as I mentioned, slower than the 5% decline, which we saw in the month of April. And in fact, AIM economist John Paulo Rivera said that this softer decline in bank lending could actually point to gradual improvement. So where did we go lower? Credit line for production activities dropped 2.9%. You've got manufacturing loans dropping, but you've also got some growth in other areas. For example, real estate and construction. Those had grown in terms of loans. Another thing that did decline, however, consumer loans, that declined by 9.2% in the month of May, but compared to April, it was a softer decline. April, we saw that down by 10.2% decline. Now, this, of course, comes as we had already reported yesterday, the Bangko Sentral lowering inflation expectations for the month of June to 4.3% versus what we've seen as 4.5% the prior 3 months there. Now, let's take a quick peek at the market's reaction to all of this data dump. Let's say we are 10 minutes into trade, seems to be firming up. That is 0.7% up. Of course, unemployment lower than the previous month here, and we are firming above 69.50. Let's take a look at, however, the sectors and how they are performing. Recall that we're trying to watch the banking sector as well on that report of the 6 months of lower lending. But you can see that all the sectors across the board, see for just a bit of industrials, but the rest actually are quite heavily in the green. You've got properties up by close to 1%. Financials that we were watching out for closely up by 0.7%. Let's take a look at the leaders and laggards for this morning's trade. You've got the MCI up by 2%. We had also reported the construction loans, they're increasing. GT Capital, SM Investments as well. On the downside, you've got Emperador down by 2.5%. And finally, I do want to take a million pesos in 2022. That's according to these. Each project would be worth around 20. So it's up by 1.5%. Quite a firm gain here. They did mention in their briefing yesterday that the residential property market is coming back. And it's the high-end sector really that's active when it comes to residential there. And they mentioned that other sectors, however, still remain quite soft. They're looking to submit 5 to 6 other infrastructure packages, but they did mention they have low interest in bidding for Sangli Airport. Recall that Sangli is, asking for bidders yet again. They said they find the project risky, but they do expect the traffic at Cebu Airport to be picking up with elections and vaccinations. And finally, I just want to take a very quick peek at Shakey's here. After they had mentioned that they have taken in J Holdings as a strategic investor, Shakey's up by 2.3%, 2.4% actually, to 8 pesos and 70 centavos. So we're going to be watching out for Shakey's and more information on all of on this specific transaction, JE or J Holdings entering as a strategic investor in Shakey's Pizza. And finally, let's check in on one other headline we're watching this morning. The Anti-Money Laundering Council has tracked suspicious transactions involving 62.5 trillion pesos just over a 3-year period. These are suspicious transaction reports, or STRs, with possible links to tax crimes. Now, based on the Financial Intelligence Unit's analysis of STRs, about 92% of the reported filed between January 2018 and November 2020 contain an amount that is not commensurate with the business or financial capacity of the client. The remaining 8% of reports filed by covered persons pertain to various predicate crimes or suspicious circumstances. Now, through these reports, AMLAC is expected to analyze patterns and trends involving tax crimes in order to crack down on offenses like tax evasion, which is now considered a predicate offense to money laundering. AMLAC Chairman and BSP Governor Ben Diokno remains confident that the Philippines will be removed from the gray list of Paris-based FATF over the next 18 months. And that's the first look into the business day. Today is Thursday, July 1st, 2021. Catch Business World Live for the market close. It's at 3:15 p.m. today. I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.